You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by Hopeless Romantic, the second installment in the When in Rome series by best-selling author Marina Adair. It's hard to believe that it's been almost a year since I recommended Romantically Challenged, the first book in Marina Adair's series, and yet here we are. Well, I'm pleased to say that this next book in the series delivers the upbeat fun of a rom-com while also tackling more serious issues, such as blended families and neurodiversity. Perfect for fans of Avery Flynn, Helena Hunting, and Christina Lauren, Hopeless Romantic is set against the breezy backdrop of coastal Rhode Island. And speaking as someone who's been stuck inside their apartment for nearly a year, a trip to New England is the perfect escape that I know I've been longing for, even if it's just in a book. Oh, and as an added bonus for all my animal lovers out there, this book also features an English bulldog named Diesel, as well as an emotional support chicken named Gregory Peck, because who doesn't love a good pun name? I also want to shout out the fact that the author, Marina Adair, will be donating part of her proceeds from Hopeless Romantic to OAR, the Organization for Autism Research. As the mother of an autistic child, this is a cause very near and dear to Marina's heart, and I absolutely commend her altruistic efforts. All the more reason to pick up a copy of Hopeless Romantic today. And now, back to the show. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and if you can believe it, we're about to dive into our second historical romance read of the month. Amazing, I know. We go an entire season with 1 to 2 historical romance reviews total, and now here we are just in February with 2 historical reads in 1 month. The theme for February's episodes is Secrets and Lies, and if a book about forbidden love during World War II doesn't fit that theme to a T, I don't know what does. Today's guests are 2 sisters who love to talk frauds, fakes, and phonies who lie every Tuesday on the Book of Lies podcast. They just celebrated their 2-year podiversary. Please join me in welcoming the lovely hosts of Book of Lies, Brandy and Sunny.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having us, Kelly. We're so excited.
Oh my gosh.
Super excited.
I'm excited to have you both. And first of all, happy 2-year podiversary.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are maturing in the podcast world, 2 years old. In podcast life is like 15 in real life, right?
Is it? I don't know. It doesn't feel like 2 years, but yeah, 2 whole years.
Yeah, so what?
Maybe we'll do 2 more.
Oh, I mean, that's the dream, right? But what was it 2 years ago that prompted the 2 of you to decide, let's start a podcast?
Oh, I love this story. So we were both avid podcast listeners, and we wanted to do something together. We went on a game show audition.
Oh!
And when afterwards we had lunch, and Brandy was telling us a story of Anna Delvey. And I was like, we're like, we should do a podcast about this. And then Brandy was writing in one of her notebooks, because she's a writer and she has thousands of notebooks all over the place. And my husband says to her, what is that? Your little book of lies? And then I was like, oh my gosh, we got to call our podcast that. And then the rest is history.
I love that. That's okay. I have to ask follow-up question. What game show were y'all on?
We were on America Says.
Oh.
I was on the Game Show Network with
I remember this show though. I'm looking it up right now to see who it was, because I do remember. Oh, this guy. I love this guy. He's in like all of the all those movies like Best in Show and A Mighty Wind. It's
Yes.
John Michael Higgins.
John Michael Higgins.
There it is.
Yes.
Yes. So we eventually made it to the show months later. So it was not all in vain. And we got a podcast out of it too. So yay.
That's amazing. I love it. And you know what? I actually did watch that show. I did when I was still living in LA. I had a short stint working in casting. And so I worked on casting several game shows, several like unscripted shows. And we had a game show that was on the Game Show Network around the same time as America Says. And I think it was called Snap or Snap Decision, something like that. And I love game shows. I'm a sucker. I mean, honestly, like, I know I'm not their demographic, but I love them.
Everybody loves game shows.
They should.
Everybody does. And they still rerun our episodes, so it's funny. No, they do. People like tag us on Twitter. They're like, hey, is this you? Or like people message me on Facebook with like a screenshot. Like, hey, I saw you on TV. I'm like, yeah, that's old news.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
I love that. What a fun thing to do together. That's amazing. So would you mind giving everyone a brief, look at your podcast, Book of Lies, and what it is that y'all talk about every week?
So we talk about scammers and fraudsters and liars and cheaters, people who make their money and try to make their livings by getting over on people. A lot of people involved in financial fraud, other people involved in identity theft.
We don't have a problem putting people on blast. We love calling them out. And I think that's kind of why people are either like hate us or love us. They're like, okay, you guys are crazy, but you're calling these people out. So we kind of like it.
I don't know what's not to love about that personally. Like, where's the hate? I mean, how could people not love that?
Just saying, right?
That's awesome. So after 2 years of episodes now, do either of you have a favorite liar, scammer, fraud story that you've discussed thus far on the podcast?
There's so many. I still pay attention to Anna Delvey. She's in prison. Apparently she has turned lesbian. She's got a girlfriend in prison. So that's fun.
Yes.
And I think they're like Netflix is offering her money to like sell her story or something, but she's supposed to give that money to her victims or the people that she, like the hotels and her friends that she grifted, pretty much.
Yeah, they paid her to do a story on her. We'll see what happens.
Interesting. So not so much a fraud story, but I actually was watching there's a brand new documentary they did on, I think it's ABC, but they released it on Hulu, and it's about the whole uprise of OnlyFans, the website OnlyFans.
What?
And it kind of made me remember like back when are you both familiar with OnlyFans?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it's kind of talking about how, they interview different sex workers and OnlyFans creators, and they talk about, the kind of content they do and what the site has done for them. But they talk about like the scam of OnlyFans that was Bella Thorne, and when she got an account and how she made like $1 million over the course of 24 hours, basically just for being Bella Thorne. Like people thought they were going to get nudes from her and they didn't. And so that's like the scam story that I think of off the top of my head. But
the thing about OnlyFans is that most celebrities that get on there are not going to show you themselves nude. Like there are people
Right.
on OnlyFans that are painting and they're doing things that they do in their everyday lives. They're just on OnlyFans, and you're the dumbass who subscribed to their channel thinking that you're going to see them naked. They didn't tell you they were going to be naked. That was your assumption.
Yeah, it's very true. It's in fact, they in the documentary they talked about how Cardi B has an account, and there's like all this great footage of her behind the scenes, like getting ready for music videos and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to watch Cardi B just in her everyday life. Like that woman is great TV.
Yeah, she makes great content, you know. It's interesting. It's just like, don't promise me one thing, or maybe she didn't promise anything. I don't know
She
like
didn't
what
promise
Bella
them.
Thorne did, but I do know she made a bunch of money on OnlyFans.
Yeah.
I do know that.
Yeah, because it was a bunch of dudes that wanted to see her naked, and that's OnlyFans means naked. That's not what OnlyFans means.
Yeah.
But you assume that, and that's your problem.
I think the initial argument was that people were like, "What? We're not going to see Bella Thorne naked? Like what?" And then it became less of like contention with the fans and more of just like sex workers being upset, or the people who are using OnlyFans for sex work. They became upset with Bella Thorne because she talked about how she was like trying to shed a light on the sex work industry, and she directed a porn film and all this, but that they were telling her like, you're taking away from our income. Like you're just being you and making all this money, and we have to work for it. And then
Right?
And then after all that, she issued like some statement of apology, but she's still on the site. She's still an OnlyFans member. And so I don't know. It was really interesting, but yeah, I totally recommend checking out the documentary because it's again, not so much a fraud or a scam, but it is interesting. And I can see where it's like you could side either way on the Bella Thorne issue.
Yeah, definitely. I'll look into that, or we'll look into that for sure.
Yeah, I don't think celebrities should have OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Because of that reason, because there are people who rely on it to feed their kids or pay their
Right.
bills, and these people that are already making millions of dollars don't need to be on there.
They already have fans. They have fans
Same with
outside of
podcasters.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And while watching it, I just kept thinking to myself, wow, should I start an OnlyFans? And I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't be that person.
Do it, Kelly. Do it.
I actually signed us up for OnlyFans, but we haven't put anything up there.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you
'Cause
do,
we ain't got no fans.
let me know because I'm so interested. I find the whole network really interesting, and just that it's become a place for, predominantly like not suitable for work content. But at the same time, you're right. I mean, that's not a requirement to be on the site. So you could just go on and, you could do podcast stuff. You could talk about liars and frauds. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'll be your fan.
maybe that's what we'll do. Our special episodes will be like us in our underwear doing an episode.
There you go.
Like granny panties.
There you go. I love it. So besides hopefully an OnlyFans account, what's coming up for Book of Lies?
Oh my gosh. Collaborations. Finally, we've made it on Boobies and Newbies.
Hell yeah.
But we've got some collaborations coming up that are exciting. We want to potentially do some live events or live podcasts, or maybe we'll do like live streaming aspects, since things aren't as open as we would have liked them
Right.
to be. But that's still something that we want to do, is to put on a live podcast in some shape, way, or form.
Well, I hope that happens, whether or not you do it in your panties or not. I mean, I think that'd be fun. Maybe we should just create an event, like a podcast event that's like podcasters in panties, and that'll just be
it'd be like a pajama party.
Yes, exactly. I'm here for it. I love wearing underwear.
Okay, all right, Kelly. We've got one member here, so that's how things begin.
Get the ball
And it
rolling.
just snowballs from there. Well, it felt only fitting to have the two of you on this month's, an episode this month, because the theme this month is secrets and lies. And who better to talk to about secrets and lies than the hosts of Book of Lies podcast?
You got it right, girl. You got it right.
Yeah.
So today's book that we will be discussing is Love and War. Straight to the point. I love it. By Shira Lynn. And this historical interracial romance was published just this month, February 2021. I still feel weird, by the way, saying 2021. Like, it just feels off to say that and not 2020.
Oh yeah, 2020 gone. It never even happened. It's like the 13th floor of a elevator, like a hotel. It doesn't exist.
And at the same time, it lasted 7 years.
Seriously.
And this book is available on Amazon for $2.99 Kindle edition, though we were provided with an advanced review copy by the author, so thank you for that. This is also the debut novel for Shira Lynn. So, as far as debuts go, deciding to write an interracial romance set during Nazi occupation of Paris, whew, man, I mean, you're throwing yourself into the deep end on that one. So, I'll give her kudos for that for sure.
Definitely. I was just like, okay, this is happening. Okay.
Yeah. Let me give everyone a brief synopsis for the novel, and then we will jump into our review. And I'm going to apologize in advance for any mispronunciation of names coming up, because we've got German names, we've got French names, and I am about as white as it comes, so I will do my best. All right, here we go. She's a singer posing as a maid. He's a surgeon forced to serve the Reich. For both of them, deception is the only way to survive the war. Cocktail singer Victoire Duplanchier knows Nazi-occupied Paris is not safe for a Black woman, but that's exactly why she's trying to get her family out. When she's caught in a roundup, a man with ocean blue eyes saves her from being sent to the camps. But can she really trust him? He might seem kind and handsome, but he's also a Nazi. Surgeon Emil von Koenig, was duped into serving the Reich by his deceitful father. When he encounters Victoire, he knows he needs to keep her safe. He offers refuge at his estate in the Parisian countryside, but in order to stay undetected, she must pose as his maid. Their new roles as maid and master find them in close confines. As their connection grows, their passion is impossible to ignore. Oh my gosh, this is the longest synopsis ever. While war rages on around them, Emile and Victoire believe they are safe, but danger is closer than ever. When the true nature of their relationship is discovered, everything will be at risk. Is their love strong enough to conquer the forces that conspire against them? Whew, man. And I do just want to share the content warning that the author issued with the book as well, which I think is important because there are several potentially triggering scenes in the book. So this book contains strong language, strong racial content, explicit sexual content, and suicide. Readers sensitive to World War II injustices and complexities, please beware. This is a standalone interracial romance, happily ever after guaranteed, mature audiences 18 and older only. Yeah, so there we go. Okay, ladies, well, I'm going to turn it over to you. First of all, before I ask you for your initial impressions, I'd love to know what your experiences have been, if any, with reading romance in the past.
This is Sunny. I'll go first. The last romance book I read, don't judge me, is 50 Shades of Grey. Or I think I tried to
You
read
said the last or
the second one, 50 Shades Darker.
Yes.
Did you say the last romance or the first romance?
The last romance book I read was that.
Okay.
So I really haven't really gotten into them, since then. I personally don't have time to read. I'm glad that we got the opportunity to read this book because, again, hey, one book down. So I just know that. I mean, Brandy, what about you?
I don't read, I read erotica. I don't read like romance. I read erotic novels. So like my first introduction to erotica actually was the Anne Rice, the Sleeping Beauty trilogy.
Yes.
And then I did read the 50 Shades book. I didn't finish the last 50 Shades book, 50 Shades Freed. I've written erotic books. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I had no idea. I'd love to read some of them for sure. I love erotica, so I am here to read the erotica.
Erotica all day long.
She's got it for you, and they're quick reads too.
Yeah, it's so funny. I actually just spoke to somebody about erotica recently, and she's an author of erotica as well, and she was telling me that like she finds it so easy to write erotica, but like she's like, yeah, I write these, short erotic stories, and it's it's just very natural to me. And writing romance, like the idea of that just seems so far from what I'm doing. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, oh, I could write a rom-com all day, every day, but like just focusing on like the erotic nature of a story, that is such a challenge to me. So it's so interesting that people approach it, you know, in different ways.
It's fun. It's just fun.
Well, then I'm definitely going to want to hear your thoughts when we get to the sexcerpt portion of this episode, because there's definitely some sexy scenes in this book. There are plenty of them, I would say, as well.
I agree. Yeah, when they came in, I was like, finally, we're getting down to it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you both, obviously Brandy has some more experience with erotica. Sunny, you said you've read 50 Shades, which, you know, that's a very typical response on this show. Let me tell you, you are in good company. And
Yay.
I'd love to know just sort of what your initial impressions were about this book.
So when I started the book, I was like, okay, I didn't read the preface. Is that what that was?
The synopsis, yeah.
The synopsis. I didn't read that. I like to go in blind. I don't want to know what's happening.
Good.
So I started and I was just like, okay, this is interesting. And I was like, wait a minute. All right. Mama's telling a story. Okay. We're going to Paris. This is interesting. And then when all the Nazi stuff was going on, I was like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little worried. But then as like the story continues to build, and I was calling her Victoria or Victory.
Okay.
Victoria. I don't know. Whatever we want to call her. As like, you know, their relationship's building and like, you know, she was talking about her family and like the different characters. I was like, okay, once it started like getting together, like once everything, the pieces started, you know, connecting, I was hooked. I was like reading it before I go to bed. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to read this. I was hitting up Brandy. I was like, okay, where are you at in the book? So it had me hooked, and I really liked Rolf. We'll talk about the characters, but I really liked Rolf.
I liked Rolf a lot too, so I'm glad I wasn't alone in that. Brandy, what do you think?
I liked Rolf as well. Yeah, when they first started talking about it, the opening scene when she's pregnant and she's walking into the house, and I'm just like, okay. And then, you know, once they get into flashback mode, then I'm like, okay, I'm in. I felt like it took longer than it needed to get to the stuff.
Yeah. No. I would agree with you. I mean, I think I get to the stuff. Now, are we talking about the sexy stuff or like the plot stuff?
Just getting into the mom story. Like there was a lot of setup just for the mom to start telling her own story.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I felt like it took a while to get into the sexy stuff. I was just like, come on, lay it on me.
We got to be clear when we say the stuff, what the stuff means to everybody. No, I agree with you. It's an interesting way to write the narrative. I don't read a lot of romance novels that begin with, you know, when were they? They were like the 1980s, 1990s, and then looking back on
1980.
Okay, yeah, and then the mom is looking back on and telling her story to her daughter in, I guess, what we would call modern day. But yeah, I don't see that a lot. And so for me, I found that interesting, but at the same time, I was kind of like wondering like, well, I'm not sure what the benefit of this is. Like if this is something that was necessary. Like I feel like the story could have started in, you know, 1940 German occupied Paris. Like, I mean, it could have started that way. I think the only thing that I really got out of that point of view was at the end when there's like the reveal of, you know, the fact that she married Emil and they made it out and everything. But I expect that in a romance novel anyway, because it's an HEA guaranteed, you know, they tell you that in the synopsis.
Well, I didn't see that part. I didn't see that there was a, you know, happy ending guaranteed. So I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is she going to go marry somebody else? Like I was not sure. So I was definitely like on the hook. I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to know what's happening, because it is really interesting. I was drawn in Like once, like you could see that there were sparks between Emile and Victorie. You're
gonna say her name 5 times.
Yes, I will say it multiple times every time. I was just like, okay, I was just like, ooh, there's chemistry between them, but what's gonna happen? And I like how he was like, oh, there's a ghost in my house. For a second, I thought there was a ghost, but he was just saying like, oh, okay, anytime I enter the room, she's gone, and vice versa.
I would have liked if there was a ghost. That would have been fun.
I was waiting.
Yeah, that would have been, a ghost would have been fun. Maybe I'll write a ghost story. Erotic ghost story.
Ghost erotica. Thank you. Anytime, by the way, I bring up paranormal romance with people, their first response is, what, like ghost fucking?
Yes, that's what's going to happen. It's an incubus and a succubus, and they're involved with humans.
I love it. I want it all. But it's this. Okay, so I think we have to talk about like the speaking of ghosts, we have to talk about like the big old elephant in the room with a book like this, because when you read that one of the main characters is going to be a Nazi, I have some reservations.
Yeah. So again, glad I did not read that part of the book until we're introduced to Emile. And was it Marrakesh? Is that where they were?
They're in Marrakesh.
In Marrakesh. And I'm like, okay, he's Austrian, he's in Marrakesh. And then they're talking about the Führer, and that, it's because of his family. So I was like, okay, so you're allowing me to give you forgiveness for being a Nazi because you didn't want, like, the way they introduced him, I did sympathize with him, and I was able to separate that he was a Nazi. But in my head, I was like, okay, he's a surgeon. Is he doing things to people over there?
Right.
Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, he's freaking Mengele and performing experimental surgeries on Jews. Like, that's where my mind was going when they were like, you're a surgeon working for the Reich. I'm like,
yeah. That's an
experimenting.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was thinking when I first read that he was a surgeon, because I did read the synopsis, because first of all, when an author or publisher asks me to read and potentially review a book, I always want to make sure that it's something that I'm interested in, that it's something that, maybe we haven't talked about. And we definitely haven't talked about a World War II era book on this podcast. I am very hesitant when discussing books related to either Nazis, plantation owners, or across the aisle political romance. These are the three things that make me very nervous when I just hear about them in a romance novel. And so when I read, though, that he was a surgeon and he's basically like sold by his father into the Reich. I mean, he's basically traded for political gain for their family. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to set aside, the fact that he's technically a Nazi and roll with it. But I'm with you. I kind of was wondering about the whole surgeon thing. Like, I was like, we never actually see him being a surgeon. Like, there's never a moment where he's being a surgeon. And so I would have liked to have seen what it is he's actually doing for them.
Right. Because he was like, my patients, I have patients. And so, and he would go to work in the morning and come back at the same time. So he had like a pretty, set schedule. So, that thought did cross my mind. But when he was like, oh, I have patients, I need to take care of them, I was like, okay, he's a good doctor. He's a good doctor.
Yeah. Unless he's, this was before the end of the war, when people fled the country and had their faces changed. So I was going to say, unless he's performing type of surgery that would help them escape. But no, that apparently wasn't what the case was.
Yeah, and we know it's not like they're in Paris. It's not like he's in the fields with, people in combat. Like, he's very much living that like 9-to-5 lifestyle as a doctor.
Pretty much.
So but that was interesting. I think there's a part of me that because of the association with Nazis and the Reich, it was hard for me to like completely invest myself in a story about a a romance between somebody who is technically a Nazi and someone else. And so for me, I just kept thinking, like, I wonder why this was the choice the author made, as opposed to him just being a surgeon in Nazi occupied Paris, where it's like you would have been forced to have dealt with Nazis anyway. Like, so I don't know. That's just kind of one of the things that I was curious about. But yeah, I mean, it's something where it's like you have to, I don't want to say set aside the fact that he's a Nazi, but it's very delicate. You have to read and understand and sympathize with him. And if you don't, then you're not going to like this book.
Right. True.
Let's talk about Victoire, or Victory, or Victoria, whatever you want to call her.
So Victoria, that's what I'm going to call her.
Okay.
She's a singer. I felt like, she was a singer and she was used to like living her best life and doing her own thing as a woman traveling the world. Has nice clothes, has class, but she's a Black woman. And I mean, that shouldn't be a but, in the 40s in Paris, she's a Black woman. And when all this Nazi occupation happened, she was like, all right, we got to go. And she was one of the first people like, okay, we got to go. But then she went back for her parents, and then she gets caught up in this whirlwind of a mess. And I like when they meet how there's like different perspectives of it, like her situation and Emil's situation. I even think Rolf's situation, we get kind of glimpses on how this whole meet cute happens, I guess. It's not really a meet
if
cute
you want to call it a meet cute.
A traumatic incident.
Yeah, for real. Ooh.
Yes, it was a traumatic incident, definitely.
Yeah.
I liked that that's who she was as a person before. And then when she meets Emil and he brings her into her home, she's like, okay, you need to buy me some magazines if you want me to cook these meals for you.
She's like, I'm not a housekeeper, so you buy me these magazines or your house is going to look like crap and your food's going to taste like dog piss.
Yeah. Well, and like when he invites over, well, doesn't really invite, but when he gets strong armed into inviting over, a fellow soldier, she's like all excited about it. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to have people over for dinner. I'm going to put on makeup. I'm so excited that I know how to cook something.
Gosh.
Like that was such a turn, because I was like, oh my God, you poor thing. It was interesting to me because in so many ways she was a modern woman. She's a single woman traveling the world. She has a career. She's not attached to anybody. She is very, willing and interested in exploring her sexuality. But then at the same time, there were moments where I was like, I feel like you're so worldly and cultured that you should know that there's something wrong going on in certain situations that she just wasn't catching on to, that I was like, okay, I think this is clearly like, this dude is bad news. This guy that's coming over for dinner, like he is psychotic. And what's going on, girl?
Yeah, that whole, well, no, I'm going to stay and I'm going to, if somebody's like, hey, so why don't you go to my house, maybe watch a movie, get you out of this situation, I'd be like, yeah, cool, let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm out.
She's like, no, I'm lonely. You guys aren't sending me away. I'm trying to hang out. And she was just like, I'm putting on my best dress and I'm putting on my reddest lipstick and these lips are popping and I'm cooking you dinner.
It's a situation where this man that's coming over is a Nazi and he likes being a Nazi. Like, what are you talking? You should leave.
Get out. Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That whole thing. It's, I liked the romance in general, but there's a scene that follows that dude coming over for what's his name, Jaeger, because I kept thinking like, oh, like
Jagger, oh yeah,
like booze.
Jagger, Jaeger.
Either way, they're both scary. But the scene after he comes over for dinner, and this is where the book took a turn that kind of lost me on some level, which is where he Emil catches Jaeger basically assaulting or in the middle of an assault of Victoire. And he immediately after kicking Jaeger out, like basically victim shames her and victim blames her and gets drunk and accuses her of like looking at Jaeger a certain way and like, oh, do you want him to touch you? I thought you only wanted me to touch you. And I just was like, whoa, this is, I get the whole like possessive alpha dominant male character in romance. Like it's very popular, but I don't know if this was necessarily the best way or the best setting to incorporate that.
Yeah.
It could have been handled differently.
It could have been handled differently. And it was like, he was, okay, I'm not making any excuses for Emil, okay? But he was drunk, he was pissed, and he's been trying to touch that booty for a long time. And Jaeger came in and he was jealous because he didn't know the actual situation. Because he was like, oh, you know, you welcome this, you know, wipe that lipstick off your face, you still smell like him. And like he had his hands around her neck, and I was just like, what the hell? Like, this, is he going to kill her? That's what I thought. And when Victoria, like, you know, this is happening in like her side of the situation, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of turned on by his hand around my neck. I was like, this girl is crazy.
I don't remember her being turned on.
She said there was, let me bring it up.
I remember, I remember there being something where she's like, part of me is like really, really into this. And so part of me was like, if you're going to do that, go full kinky, man. Like, make it kinky. Make her be into him choking her out, you know, whatever it, like, he already mentions in a previous scene that he stole a pair of her underwear and, like, sniffs them and stuff from her cottage.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, shit, if we're going to go that way, go do it, you know? And so, but yeah, I don't know. It was borderline cringy to me, that particular scene between the two of them.
Yeah. Like in romance, there doesn't always have to be abuse happening. That's the whole thing. Like, not even in romance, in erotica. Like, if you're gonna make a BDSM book, then do that. But don't incorporate elements of abuse and have the characters be turned on by it and not make it a BDSM book. Like, it could have totally turned out where they were like, she's like, okay, spank me, daddy. And the safe word is pineapple. And we went there, but we didn't.
Right.
So you felt like you
so it was, you know, it's just like, why even make that happen? Like, it could have been a scene where he comes in and he's pissed. And he's pissed. He's angry. He's directing his anger at her, but he doesn't have to put his hands on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So there's a whole dynamic that crosses a line that it could have been written differently.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the beauty of romance and erotica, and is that you can explore these fantasies, and you can explore plenty of dangerous taboo fantasies too. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I want to say in some of the sex scenes we get with Rolf, who I want to talk about because I love Rolf, and his lover, I want to say his lover actually does call him daddy. And I'm like, okay, like, this is,
yes, she does.
This is where we're going.
She does.
And that's the thing, is I'm like, look, if you're going to do it, like, go for it, you know? And so I feel like there were like, and maybe it's because this is also like the author's debut novel, and like, she doesn't want to take things too far or, you know, play things a little bit safer. Like, I get it. But having read it now, I would say that, like, you know, if there was a kinky element, or if Victoire like shut him down that night and is like, look, I like it rough, but this is not okay. Like, I would have liked that more.
Yeah.
Just because we need to see people talking about sex just as much as we do need to see them we need to see them having sex. Like, we need to see that. But, you know, the stuff.
Right.
The stuff.
Oh gosh. But, yeah, so I will say that after that scene, I kind of removed myself a little bit, just because I was having trouble kind of understanding the attraction to Emil. Like, obviously we know that he's not invested in being a Nazi. We know that he wants to get out of there. He wants to take Victoire with him. But I was having trouble with their relationship after that point. And it ends happily. They end up together. Things go okay, you know, but yeah, it was it was a personal issue for myself.
I feel you.
It's one of those things where when I read, I think in my mind, I'm like, why did the author make these choices? And I guess that's just, from reading and being a writer. And I'm like, and there were areas and elements where I was like, okay, well, I would have done this differently. I would have done that differently. So I was just trying to read from like just a reader perspective. And it changes the way you look at a book. And if you're a reader, like you obviously read a whole bunch of books all the time. So it probably, changes the way you see characters and when you're, reading a bunch of different, well, they're mostly romance books, but when you read a bunch of different authors, you see where like the choices that the author makes can affect how you feel about your characters.
It's true. It's true. Well, and like in this book, one of the things that I thought she did really well that kind of informed a different way of reading was that she sets up all these different characters and you learn different pieces about them and like where they came from that might not make sense right then and there. Like, who is David, this child that lives in the woods with his family? But
rabbit.
It makes sense later on. So I thought she did a really good job of kind of setting up all these different points of views and narratives that thread together really well. And so that's a great example of, you read something differently because of a device like that. So let's talk about Rolf because poor Rolf. Spoiler alert, Rolf dies and it's not pretty. It's really, really tragic. Ugh.
I was not expecting that. I liked when we were introduced to Ayuba. His we find out that he has a woman up in I want to say Morocco.
Yeah.
In Morocco. And they've made a love child together and he's like, I'm going to buy a house for you. I'm going to keep you and your family safe. You're my family. I love you. Because when we're interacting with him or when he's just with Emil, he just seems so gloomy and like doesn't want to be there and just sad and what have you.
Yeah, because his mind's always somewhere else.
His mind is always someone else, but we never knew where it was until after the house scene that happened with Jaeger. And he was like, dude, be cool. I understand you love this woman and that's what it's like when you get some action. He's like, I've never had any action yet. He was like, oh well, boy howdy, you just wait. And boy howdy, because Ralph's love scene is like the first love scene that we get in the story.
Actual
sex
scene.
And I was like, okay, Ralph is a freak. And, he's having the best time of his life. And then we find out his dad knows what's been going on. And I don't want to, I'll let someone else pick it up from there.
I enjoyed him as a character. I like how he's introduced when he's, there's the twin titties. And he comes, he's late, and he doesn't give a shit about Dottie or Lottie or whatever her name is.
Lottie and Dottie.
And they're like, well, he's gay. And he looks at him like, fuck you bitches, I ain't gay. And, just that whole thing about, I don't care about you. I got something better. Mm-hmm. And so, like there's something going on with him from the get-go, but you don't know what it is. And then when Emil and Victoire, see each other, that whole scene when he's like, there's a lot of people that don't want you guys to be together because of the color of her skin and this. And I'm like, okay, so he's into the swirl and cool. And so we don't get to know, what's going on with him until almost the last act of the show, the movie, the show, the book movie.
Act 3, baby.
But I enjoyed his what he brought to the story,
his friendship, and he was very protective of Victoria also,
right? Because she reminded him of his lady,
exactly. And then Emil would be like sideways jealous. He's like, hey, I don't like that you guys are laughing with each other. What's going on?
I was
so funny over here.
I was more invested in Rolf than I was Emil, honestly, throughout, because he just, until he dies, until he commits suicide because he's been told that his wife and his lover and their son and her family have all been murdered. I was like, oh, there's going to be another book, and it's going to be all about Rolf and his lady love. And I guess
But
not.
no.
I guess not. You know what? I will say it's interesting because I did think that he was gay in the beginning. Like, I thought his story was going to be that just as Emil is hiding his relationship with Victoire, we have Rolf who's also hiding a relationship with a man. And I almost would have preferred that. Not that I didn't love the story that he had, but I kind of get annoyed when characters have like the same storyline as each other, if that makes sense. Like, because in this one we have two white men who are both traded into the Reich by their fathers, their tyrant fathers,
Right.
and they are both in love with black women. It is forbidden for both of them. One of them gets a tragic ending, one of them gets a happily ever after. And for me, it kind of got a little borderline fetishizing of black women to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. Definitely.
Yeah, I did get those.
Okay.
Those
sentiments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
did.
Okay, cool. Yeah, which is interesting because, you know, the author is a black woman. And so one of the things that did draw me to the book was that I was like, okay, this is a different point of view. This is a different narrative than I've seen with books set in this time period. So that's what I was like so intrigued with. And I feel like I would have liked maybe more of Victoire's point of view than I would have Emil's, because I don't think we would have gotten necessarily that take if it had been only from her point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
But that being said, the sex was pretty steamy with all parties involved. Rolf and his gal and Emil and Victoire. It was pretty spicy.
Right. I was kind of exhausted with the meal. I was like, oh my God, I'm tired, man. Give me a break.
Well, and did you notice that in both the Emil and Victoire scenes and Rolf and his lover, their scenes, it's like, it's not like multiple scenes. It's just like they just go like 3 times in a row, like back to back.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I was like. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, like once that's what we were waiting for. We were waiting for the love and the romance to happen. I was just really put off by Emil and Victoria. And he was like, oh, you know, you're my nectar tree.
That's not what he said.
Nectar. I'm sorry. Apricot tree, tangerine, whatever. One of those. Apricot. And like, he was like sapping her up, like just like during like the act, like he's like eating. Oh God, it was just weird.
There's
really
several
weird.
like honey.
It is.
There's
So
like
That's how I read
honey references too. There's a bunch of like honey references.
That honey cake was a total metaphor, by the way.
He's like, Mom's honey cake is mine. No honey cake for y'all.
The honey cake is a metaphor. I did enjoy the sex scenes. I thought they were really well written. I was like, you know, in those first when they're first in the house together, and then like he's, you know, sniffing her neck, and like I'm just like, God damn it, just freaking like take your clothes off. Just take your clothes off.
Yeah. How did you feel about the fact that there's several instances of them using French and German and English?
Yeah.
So that really put me off, and every time I had to read a passage that was first in German and then in English, or first in French, then in English, I was just like, God dang it. Like, I had to put the book down for a few minutes because I was just like, that pisses me off. Like, we understand they're in another country and they speak other languages, but we don't need to see it. We don't need to have to struggle to read that language. And it got to a point where I started skipping over those, you know, and going to the brackets. I'm like, we understand.
Yeah.
You could you don't have to put it in another language every single time they're speaking in another language.
Right.
Because he was yelling
right.
at her in German when he was drunk.
A lot of
She's like, I don't understand you.
Right. Where like a lot of times it didn't matter what language they were speaking in.
Right.
But when it was important, like, you know, when they were yelling at her in German, that's when you can use the German. But if you're just saying he's making a comment to her like, oh yeah, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then it's a passing comment. Why do we need to see that as in German? If you're going to say it in English.
That's a good point. Well, and also there would be like really massive paragraphs. I mean, there would be several lines at a time in one language, switch to English for the translation, go back to German, go back to the translation. And it's in a sex scene especially, I found that really difficult to read just because it kept drawing me out of the passion.
Yes.
I did what Brandy said, and when I saw it, a big old section in German, I was like, skip, where's the English? All right. I didn't skip a beat. I mean, it was a little off-putting as well. I enjoyed reading the French aspect to try and, you know, to quiz myself, but I did just, you know, jump to the English portion.
And a lot of readers aren't going to do that. They're just going to be like, okay, well, it's in another language. I'm not going to finish this book.
Mm.
And that's
and
a
see,
thing
part
that,
of me,
like, as writers, keep in mind.
I love the fact that authors are incorporating different languages into their books. Like, I mean, I'm thinking about, I read, what was it? I read You Had Me at Hola last year, and there's some like beautiful, you know, incorporation of Spanish into it, but there's also, it's not every line. I mean, there's a lot of the times it would be used where, like in this book, he calls her his angel in German. It's like Mon Ange or something. I mean,
Mon Ange.
Yeah, I'm not.
Mein Engel is in German.
But he spoke French too, so I was going with Mon Ange.
Yeah, exactly. I speak French too, so that's I picked up on the French parts of it, but I'm like, that would be something where it's like, if he calls her that as like an endearment, we can pick up on that, like after the first couple of times, but having them constantly switching back and forth, I did find distracting. So I think that's another thing that people are either going to really love or not like.
Yeah. Like, and it's fine if it's just one language, but it wasn't. That was the issue. Just like, dang, man.
It is
I don't speak either language.
Yeah.
I speak Spanish and Italian, but I wouldn't write a book that has Spanish and Italian in it.
Oh God. It is
like
very
that.
reflective of the times. Like, I will say that, like, obviously that is Paris in 1940, like German, French, a little bit of English. Like, I get it. But yeah, I don't know. Did you now that we're talking about the sexcerpts, did y'all have a favorite sexcerpt that you wanted to either discuss or share aloud with the class?
Or share aloud with the class.
As you're looking for one, I have one that I want to share, and it's not even specifically because it's my favorite, but there are certain words used in this one that I just think need to be highlighted.
Do it.
Oh gosh. So I don't know if this is the first time that Victoire and Emile have sex, but it's definitely, this is like a foreplay scene leading up to when they do have sex. So I think he's got, like, just to bring everyone up to speed, he's got like a couple fingers inside her at this point.
Okay, yeah.
I thought this was interesting. Every time she like whimpers or is like nearing orgasm, her dialogue is really weird. It's like, ha.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you
all
laughing?
those A's and H's?
So I'll start with ha. She whimpers, quivering, lifting her hips to my touch. Emile, please. I insert a third finger, twisting and thrusting, slowly widening her to welcome my girth. Please, she whimpers, imploring me for more. I honor her request, removing my fingers, licking off her nectar. There it is, nectar. And then this is my favorite part coming up because I had to reread this just to make sure I had this was what I had actually read. I line myself up to her sheath and pray silently that I don't hurt her. The Österreich blood that courses through my veins has made me a man of generous proportions, not just in height. I bend down and lay myself over her body, settling my full weight on my arms. I rest my forehead on the bed by her ear and caress her cheek, working my thumb into her mouth. See, again, he's like, bite down on my thumb and brace yourself. I was like, yes, go kinky. Let's get it done. But I just could not stop laughing when he started talking about how big his dick was.
Yeah. I did think about that. I was like, oh my gosh, she's got a forearm, huh? I wonder.
It's that Österreich blood coursing through his veins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would prefer that she talk about his wiener, not him, but that's just me.
Yeah. I'm with you.
I would prefer she talk about his wiener.
I'm just saying, like, the man's like, oh yeah, my dick is big. I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Because if a man is talking about how big his dick is, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. Like, I want to hear her talk about how big his dick is.
Exactly.
Let me hear her say it.
Exactly.
Like, can she tell me, not you?
Yeah. How about either of you? Any specific scene you want to share?
Let's talk about Rolf. Okay, I hope
Yes.
I don't. Okay, here we go. So it goes, Rolf. Ayuba screams out for the third time that I've made her come on my tongue. I've moved up her body slowly to kiss her. She moans at the taste of her own juices on my lips. Rolf, si amor. Ayube hesitates for a moment.
Oh, that's right. There's 4 languages because they're speaking Italian in this book.
Oh yeah, because her dad's Italian.
Oh
She
my
speaks Italian,
gosh.
Si amore. Ayuba hesitates for a few moments, so I sit up on my elbow and wait for her to collect her thoughts. Wait. This is afterwards. Hang on a second.
Are you looking for the beach?
The daddy. Here it is. Sorry. Let's go back.
There you go.
Doing Italian. I can't speak Italian. See, daddy.
Sì, daddy. Ci sono quasi. Sto venendo. There you go.
Thanks.
Well, there's the English right there.
Yeah. So this is kind of like right in the middle of the scene. So hang on a minute. Rolf gave us all the booty. Hang on a minute.
All the booty.
It's the one thing missing from this book is more booty action.
Okay, right? Oh, this is when he's throwing her in the water. Okay.
It's right after that, right?
Yeah, this is when they're on the beach, right? Okay. So they're in the water after Rolf throws her in the water. Ayuba reaches down in the water, spreading her legs wide, rubbing her clit up and down against my clothed cock. She arches her back in pleasure, take advantage, bending over and claiming a pebbled espresso bud in my mouth. I nibble and lick, keeping my eyes on her, watching her please herself. I must push her back from me and place both my hands on her ass, allowing her to float. I think I thought it was how she would use the terms for like a clit or like a bud or I don't think they ever said bean, but I was really thinking about bean a lot. A bud or a
bud is a nipple.
Is that what he was talking about? Her nipple?
Yes. Well, I
Yeah.
guess I didn't.
I guess so. Okay. A little coffee bean nipple? Is that what he's talking about? I thought
Espresso colored nipples.
He's just not being specific enough for you. That's okay. I mean, that's a valid concern.
How dare you, Rolf?
How dare you?
I did like that scene in the water though, because he basically has her like floating on the water while he's going down on her. I was just like, oh, this is interesting. This is different.
Right? Yeah, I'm like, okay, it's my turn. This is nice. Thanks, Rolf. Good man.
I feel like 2021 so far has been a lot of water segzerps in our reads. And I don't know if that's a trend right now or what.
The 2021 trend is water sex scene.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's okay.
If that's what you like.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see more people using lube in water sex scenes. That would be my preference.
Please. That's what is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, maybe not in 1940 though. Ugh, c'est la vie.
Probably not. There probably wasn't any.
That's a good one. Brandy, did you have one as well that you wanted to share?
There's one. Okay, so taste us, mon ange. I roll them around in my mouth, tasting the heady mixture of brandy and musky sweetness that makes my eyes roll close. Oh, this is when he puts his fingers in her mouth.
Taste us. Ugh.
Yeah. I pull my leg down from him and make my way up to my knees. With my hands, I urge him back against the bedpost. I grab the mahogany wood cylinder with both hands, trapping Emil between my breasts and the strong, intricately carved post. Sliding down, kissing and licking his lips, I settle perfectly on top of his erection. We moan loudly in unison. My head reels back, thrusting my breasts to his lips, where he masters them, suckling and whirling, flicking and nipping. He grabs my hips and digs his fingers deep into my flesh, demanding control of his own pleasure, using my body to stroke himself. The very thought of myself being a tool for his own pleasure sends me over the edge, and I come again, convulsing violently, kicking my legs outward and burrowing my nails into his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just like scrolling through my like bookmark pages too, and I have like there's like at least like 4 other sex scenes that I've just like put a bookmark on. There's the one where they like talk about apricots.
That's Sunny's favorite one.
Yeah, and she goes down on him at one point. He's like always going down on her. And yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like a lot of times in romance, when you read the dual perspective, it's like it'll change perspective like every chapter. And she, in this book, like has them change perspectives like throughout the chapter. Like she'll have like a couple paragraphs from Victoire's point of view, and then it'll jump to Emil's point of view for like a page and then go back to Victoire. So it's definitely more, like spur of the moment. Like you don't have to wait a whole chapter to get to the next POV. It'll come, like right away.
Yeah. I did like that. I like that, like, while we're, reading the scene or in this scene, then it's like, okay, you're going to hear, like, Victoria's point of view or Emil, and then it would go back and forth, like, woo, all right. This is steamy.
Very immediate, like very, very right in the moment. And those moments, I think like some of the sex scenes are some of the best moments in the story because of that. The pacing feels really, really right on. Except when they start speaking German, and then I'm like pulled right back out of it.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute, this is a book. I forgot.
You're like, God damn it, why?
Maybe this is just my point of view too, but like German to me is not like one of the sexiest languages.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's very hockey and aggressive. It sounds like they're angry at you.
Something's caught in my throat, and it's not your dick.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I saw an opportunity. I had to take it. So
I'm glad you did.
Thank you. So at this point, if we don't have any other thoughts on the book, I will ask you to give the book a few grades, but I want to make sure that we've covered everything that we wanted to talk about. So anything left to say?
I liked how full circle David comes back, her little rabbit, and her dad, and not her dad, David's dad. How, when she goes to her cabin and like there's a gunfight and we don't know who's on the other side of the fight. Then we learn that it's David's father and who's been like leading the rebellion. I like that, it kind of brought it in full circle and like, she had more allies, and they were like, we have to help this woman. Like she's kept our son fed and, reading, and now he has a little friend who's reading books with, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, he's a Nazi. Girl, you tripping. We are not going for him. He's a Nazi.
Yeah, we've been waiting the whole book for somebody to say it, and somebody finally did.
Right. You're like, hello. This makes no sense.
He's a Nazi.
I mean, I felt, I don't think there's anything else that I feel to be brought up.
Well, then we can move on to giving this book a few grades if you desire. And on this podcast, we grade for heart, humor, and heat. Although I'm going to take a wild guess and say humor isn't going to factor into this particular review. And it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that it could possibly be. So let's focus on the heart and the heat in this one. And we'll start with heart, and I will turn it over to you gals. What do you think out of 10? What are we going to give the heart of this book?
No. What is our criteria for heart?
I mean, like the love story, like the actual romance, like, and that can be, heart can also extend beyond the romance. It can be familial heart. It can be between friends. So like any sort of love element.
I myself, this is Sunny, I'm going to give it a strong 8.5. If not, I'm going to give it 8.5 on the heart. And I say that because like I like their love story. I like that, you know, he was kind of obsessed with her, to be quite honest. He saw her in Marrakesh a year ago and was like, "Ooh, I have to have her. She gonna be mine." And then he saw her and he was like, "Haha, you are mine now." And I like the love story. I'm glad they finally got together because, you know, that tension was building of, oh, you know, I don't want to overstep my boundaries. And he's like, "Please overstep your boundaries." And, you know, to find out that they end up together at the end. It gets to 8.5 because he was a Nazi. So it is so
you have to go. Yeah, you have to take a few points off for him being a Nazi, whether he wanted to be there or not.
I'm going to give it an 8. I would really, really have liked to have seen more between Rolf and Ayuba. And I feel like we didn't get to see enough of their relationship. We got a glimpse of their dynamic, and then a tragedy befalls them. So I just, you know, that part takes away a couple of points.
Yeah, that broke my heart. I was sad.
Yeah, I agree with you. And here's the thing is, like, I realize that the story ends happily, and you don't know this because you don't read a lot of romance, but like the one criteria for a romance novel, a true romance novel, is that there is a happily ever after, or what we call a happily for now. So like I went into this knowing, okay, she's going to end up with Emil. They're going to be okay. Now I know that doesn't extend to everybody. Like Rolf has a very, very tragic ending. And I mean, obviously, I'm a romantic at heart. I want everybody to be happy and okay. And this is World War II. Like, it's impossible to assume that that's going to happen. So part of me was like expecting somebody to die. And I feel like poor Rolf was just the casualty that we had on hand. You know what I actually almost expected? I almost expected him to die and then this reveal to be that his family was actually okay, like that there was never anything wrong with them, or like they'd been sent away and rediscovered later on or something like that. But I'm with you. I feel like it was we had this one lovely moment with him and Ayuba, and then that's it. We never hear from or see her again. We just hear that they've been you know, taken care of.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was messed up, and Rolf was like, "Oh, I can't. Nope. It's over."
So the suicide that happened in this book, I feel there was two components. It was an act of defiance, and it was an act of grieving, because his family and his baby, they're gone, but also you're not going to get what you want from me, Father.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think for my heart rating, I might even go a little bit lower. I might give it like a 7.5, because I was so invested in Rolf and Ayuba, and that was stripped away from me. And then with Emil and Victoire, you know, it was that I don't know. There was that moment in the middle where he goes all caveman on her that just really irked me. And then, of course, he's a Nazi.
There it is.
There it is. Whoop, there it is.
Whoop, there it is.
I'm going to skip over the humor because the shit ain't funny, and go straight to the heat and ask you what you thought of that on a scale of 1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I did enjoy the sex scenes. I was happy when they came up. When I was reading it, I was afraid that somebody was looking at what I was looking at. When you're like on a bus or a train or something, and you're like reading a love novel or a sex novel, and the sex scene happens, you don't think everybody, like, nobody knows what you're reading. You're just like, oh my god, what if somebody saw me reading this? So I'll give them a 9 for that, because it was like, okay, these are good. And they were back to back to back once they finally happened. And there was even some little masturbation scenes too. Like, hanging out. Who's sleeping?
You had a wet dream.
Was it a wet dream?
Oh my God. Okay. I forgot about that scene. Oh.
Right. And he's just sitting there watching her like a creep. Was that my name? Did she say my name?
And she's like rolling all over the floor too, like dreaming about him. She's like rolling over and like humping the ground. I'm just like, damn, this is one hell of a dream.
Okay. Yeah. It was like a freaking Megan Thee Stallion scene. Roll over to the crybaby on the ground. But I'll give it a 9. Like, I did enjoy it. I don't read a lot of, like you said, I don't read a lot of romance or erotica or read a lot of anything, but I enjoyed it and I followed along. And then like once those scenes like started to come in, I just like devoured the rest of the book. I was just like, I need to know. So I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay.
Yeah, I give it a strong 9. The buildup, you know how you get to that point and you're like, okay, somebody needs to take off their clothes. Like, that's the whole thing. Get naked. There's all this buildup. We know that there's this sexual tension between them and we have to wait. And then we have to wait some more. And then we have to wait some more. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, they want to be, they're in polite society. But I'd be like, listen, I know you want me and I want you, so why don't you show me that D? But so it could have gotten into it a lot sooner. And I get, there's a purpose for it, but yes, strong 9 for sure.
Very elegantly phrased. I love it. Yeah, no, sometimes the sexual tension and the buildup in romance novels is sexier than the sexerps themselves. And this was one of those books where the sex scenes are very in depth, which I love, very graphic language, explicit. I'm here for all of it. But I did also love that buildup as well. So I'm gonna give it like either an 8.5 or a 9. Like, I thought the scenes were great. I will say I don't like him talking about his dick, and she has some very weird exclamations in their sexual.
Yeah, the like there's a lot of A's and H's.
Yeah.
A lot of A's and H's going on.
Yeah, it was definitely not
like 2 A's, 2 H's, you're good.
It was not what I expected to hear from someone in the throes of passion.
All that onomatopoeia going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Well, ladies, we've come to almost the close here. And so before I let you go, I will ask you, now having read this book, have your perceptions of the genre changed, and do you plan on reading more romance perhaps in the future?
I do plan on reading more. So I definitely want to read more books, and I've listened to your episodes before. I'm like, oh, I should probably read that book. And I just don't. Like, I feel like, oh, I'm finding out about it on the podcast. I don't have to read it. But I definitely, I really like this story. I like the author. I could really like visualize, and I was just like, okay, this is nice. So I definitely will try and, fit more of these types of pieces of literature in my life.
Nice.
I read pretty much everything, so
yeah,
I'll read what comes across my table. I do have a reading list, and there isn't actually, you know what? I'm reading Lady Chatterley's Lover right now. So, yeah, I guess
Ooh,
I'm reading romance.
a classic for sure.
So yeah, I'm returning to the classics this year. Great Expectations is next.
Okay, sounds good. So an open mind, an open desk policy for things to read. Fabulous. That's a great way to get through the year. Well, I'm excited that y'all joined me for this episode, especially considering the theme this month. It seems very on brand. I'm excited to hear more lies and fraudsters and scamsters in the future, because I might talk about romance, but I love listening about true crime and people who suck.
Oh, girl, we got you. Don't you worry. And no, I'm so happy that like we made this happen, and like, you had us on. This was a lot of fun. So I felt like we were in a book club together, reading a book, and
Yes.
talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah, that's fun.
Perfect.
I love the people who suck aspect. That's fun.
That could be the new tagline, like just people who suck.
Yeah, we got to add that in there, right? People who
Oh my gosh. Well, where can everybody find and follow Book of Lies podcast?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So you can visit our website, bookofliespodcast.com. We're on all of the things on Twitter. We're at Book of Lies Pod, Instagram and Facebook, Book of Lies Podcast. Like you heard earlier, we release an episode every Tuesday, and we are on all the podcast players and catchers. We're there. So come find us. We've got lots of episodes for you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, ladies. And I look forward to, hopefully, like you said, another two more years of the podcast ahead of you.
The future is bright.
And then some. Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.